Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I was told already before I started that I had 4 times as many slides as anybody else. So what I'm going to do is very quickly run through it. Stuff that I leave out. We'll leave a few minutes for questions at the end, and you can give out to me about whatever I've left out, and then I'll discuss that. Okay? So basically the question that's often asked is, how did cricket survive in Fingal when it became a minority sport in the rest of the country? And what I want to look at actually is more social history than sporting stuff. So the format for the talk will be fairly straightforward. Big house cricket, democratisation, why did it survive, cricket in Fingal before World War I, the Fingal League, and then Fingal teams in Dublin. Okay, so we'll take the big house cricket first. Mrs Taylor kept a social diary, and the first account of cricket in Fingal was in Argyllin, 1825. Now this was an excuse. It was an excuse for a party. You know, you had drink and wine and dancing and all the rest of it. The cricket was a sort of a byproduct. But it's a bit like studying. It's a socially acceptable waste of time. So they were in Argyllin, and the next place they played was Hamilton of Balbriggan, because the gentry only played one another. You wouldn't want to be mixing with the lower orders. Palmer of Kenure House, Talbot of Malahide, Hamilton of Balbriggan again. Now in Balbriggan they went at it a second time, and they went to Mr Hamilton and said, can we have a field please to play on your lovely estate? And he agreed, and all the gentlemen in the area turned up, and a number of peasants. Well, that's what they were describing as the paper, which actually is an interesting concept. Mr Hussey then of Weston House in Naul, and the son there was so fond of cricket that he had his labourers play cricket every afternoon. Well, actually, now what they did was they bowled to him while he batted. The gentlemen always batted. The lads bowled because it's physically much more demanding. And on that basis, that's why Fingal has turned out magnificent bowlers, and only in the last 25, 30 years have they started to produce batsmen. So Mr Hussey of Weston House, Woods of Milverton Hall, and that's the estate that looks over the Hills Cricket Club where I was president for a number of years, Woods of Whitestown. So there's your stately homes, right? Now, all gentry, and we'll just have a few photographs just to lighten the load. Argyllin, Hampton Hall, that was an Irish college for a number of years. Kenure, one of the great houses, and very, very sad that all was left of it was the portico. Very, very sad. Next one, Milverton Hall, that was demolished for a much more practical house. The upkeep of that just became too much for the Woods family. And that was the family that gave the Hills the ground. Malahide Castle, Weston House, now that's it rebuilt. Is rebuilt in the last 10, 15 years. Right, now clubs started to be formed. Malahide, the gentry were still involved. There was Mr Talbot started that club. So the gentries were still involved. They provided the ground, they provided the equipment, they provided everything. And they Balbriggan played Malahide then. This is where the peasantry attended. One of the great days, all the gentlemen and lady of the area were there. Balbriggan got a few runs and Malahide got a few more, but they said they did great to be playing against such wonderful people as the lads from Balbriggan. Weston House, Weston had their own cricket team. And the next one is an example, and I want to when they played, show how they were entertained, because the Fingal clubs have a fantastic reputation with regard to hospitality. A fella said to me when he was launching the thing in the Hills, I have no interest in cricket, I'll only go out here for the food. So after play, Mr and Mrs Hussey displayed their usual hospitality by entertaining the players and visitors to a sumptuous déjeuner. Now, I don't know why they couldn't call it lunch. After drinking the usual loyal and complimentary toast, the company parted at a late hour. Now, this is imagine that, isn't that beautiful? Highly pleased after indulging in the feast of reason and the flow of soul. Now, isn't that beautiful? There's no mention of the cricket match, but who matter? So that was the Husseys, right? Drive on. Cricket is now taken off all over the country. And the Freeman's Journal, which will be a very, very strongly nationalist paper, at the start of the cricket season, country gentlemen should unite and form clubs in their county. These clubs should not be exclusively comprised of gentlemen. The best men, whether gentlemen or otherwise, should be found and got to play matches. And they followed it up. It's no exaggeration to say cricket is known and played all over the island. We may take it for granted that the youth of the next series will establish it permanently. They didn't, but we'll see what happened. So, catching on, everything going great, clubs starting to be formed. Knockbrack 1880. I met a man who played in the centenary match in Knockbrack. He doesn't remember the match, he just remembers the drink after it. He said it was a great day though. Team in Skerries, team in Balbriggan, team in Knoll, team in Balscadden, team in Garristown, team in Old Town, team in Ballymedun. And then everything went wrong. Everything possible went wrong. And we'll start with the land war. In 1879, Michael Davitt speaking in Malahide. I can tell the Holts, the Iron Trant Hamiltons, the Talbots, the Palmers, amongst the rest of them, there's no rampart of injustice in Ireland which Irish democracy cannot scale, and no garrison of landlord oppression which the weapons of the Land League, which are justice, reason and combination, cannot bring to ground. Stand together, and landlordism will soon be compelled to give up the ghost before the national demand of the land for the people and quit Dublin County and Ireland forever. Now, you wouldn't be too dying on the cross to play cricket when I fell down at the station in Malahide saying that kind of stuff. Other reasons. GAA was founded in 1884. Now, in fairness to the GAA, it was another summer sport. There wasn't the bitterness that's associated in other. It was simply another summer sport looking for access to a field in the area. So it wasn't. It was just one of the things that was going to stop cricket, partially. This was more serious. The Gaelic revival, the Irish Irelanders. If you had anything to do with England, you were referred to as a Shawneen, a Little John Bull. So it was. That was in the 1890s. The Abbey Theatre, the Gaelic League, and so on. But the sports historian Paul Rouse of UCD said the fault was entirely the cricket establishment that the game ceased as a majority sport, because they hated the concept of structures. What they liked was a trip down to Lismore for 2 or 3 days, a feed a drink, or down to Mount Juliet, and he did this old crack about playing competitive cricket they had no interest in. And I've 2 little small quotes here written. This one was written in relation to the World War. And it was written in 1951, but it's to do with the First World War. A change took place affecting the lives of everyone. Very much included was our game of cricket. Now, this is the World War to end our wars. As was then played with plenty of leisure, 2 or 3 day matches and proper coaching, with plenty of time for visiting sides, with expenses no hindrance. Those were the days when cricket as it should be. Now, isn't that beautiful? 2 or 3 days down in Lismore drinking. And the other variation, now this is 1936, which is even worse. We should see good cricket in Rathmines today. It'll be the joyous game, played for the glory of the game. No points, no leagues, no cups, just willow crashing leather, which to my mind is exactly as it should be. Now you can probably see why cricket ceased, why there were no structures in place, because they wouldn't have structures, and that was Trinity, Phoenix and Leinster, which were the 3 big clubs. Now, because of the land war, there were now identity issues for the Catholics who were going to be playing, or the farmers. So there was a report appeared on the National, or the Freeman's Journal. In your issue of today, there appears a report of a cricket match between Weston Knoll and the Mat CC. The same report is incorrect. There's no club whatsoever in Westtown. The game was played between Knoll and the Mat on the ground of A.S. Hussey, kindly given for the occasion. When stumps were drawn, the Knoll had scored 40 for the loss of 5 wickets. They'd scored 41. Your report says they'd only scored 40. Now, just get it right. Just don't be messing. And the reason for that was the Duffs were nationalists. So while they were happy for your man to give them the ground, they didn't definitely want their club called Weston Knoll. The other variation on that was the team in Garristown called themselves Fog of Valach, get out of the way. The Hills, the Black Hills, called themselves the Shamrocks. And during the Boer War, they decided that they would call themselves the Cronje Black Hills to show solidarity with the Boers who were fighting the British. So it was important to be making a statement about your identity. Why did it survive then in Fingal? The first thing, as a result of the Land Acts, people were able to buy small holdings. And then that small holding, it was enough, say 25, 30 acres, enough to make a living. So you could give over a field, but the only field you could give over, you couldn't give over a field with crops on it. You could give over a field where animals were grazing. The best one to get was one with sheep, because the grass tended to be lower. Now, it also meant that the first job you had on a Sunday, when you were getting the ground ready for cricket, was to be clearing up excrement, we call it. And a very senior cricketer said to me one time, he was a junior up in a Fingal club, the most junior member of the team, and when the ball landed in a cowpat, he was sent the distance the whole way across to collect it because nobody else had gone near it. So they were able to spare a field for periods of time, but not for the whole. So that's the first thing. So the fields were grazing. And today, there's a part of a cricket ground which is referred to as cow corner. The gentleman would always use a straight bat, so they hit it that way. Now, cow corner was where you pulled on it. The cows were grazing over there, so it was assumed that no cricket ball would go over there, ever. So it wasn't a correct cricket shot. It was the type of shot that an unsophisticated cricketer would play. So fields for grazing. Gentry and tenants, relations were civil. I'm not saying they were pals, but they were civil. The Woods of Milverton, their proudest boast was that not one of their tenants died during the famine. So there wasn't that residual bitterness. So, although no, they weren't pals, we're not saying they were big buddies or out drinking together. No, because the gentry often had their food in the house, whereas the lads had their bit of lunch out the back somewhere. So we're no one saying that they were friends, but there was a connection and cricket provided it. There were summer residents out to Skerries. Do you know the tradition of the people in Skerries and in Rush having a little house down in the garden, and you know the man sending his wife and children out to Skerries or Rush for the holidays, and then they'd arrive out on a Friday if they could manage it. So summer residents in Rush, so they played cricket. Balbriggan was an industrial centre, so there were people coming into Balbriggan all the time from England, from Scotland and from Wales. Now, we're going to take two clubs. The Home Patrick Club was the top end of Skerries, and they would be basically, there were Anglicans, there were summer visitors and people who rented homes. Okay. Very, very few from the town played with that team. When they played a game against Balbriggan in 1901, there was only two residents of Skerries on it. The rector, the Reverend R.W. Sheagog, and Edward Bailey. And Edward Bailey actually became secretary of the golf club. Now, they weren't, and this is going to be emphasised, it wasn't just cricket. They were into social activities as well. And their highlight of the year was their concert. Concert, great success, admirable programme. Names of several very prominent metropolitan artists who were coming out from town. And then, if you were able to move, which I think is beautiful, the free of movement, they cleared the floor, and they were able to indulge in the practice of terpsichorean art to their heart's content. Isn't that beautiful? And then, when you were finished all that, you could get a train back into Dublin at 12:15. So this was the cricket club, the tennis club, very, very much part. So that's one end of the town. Now, they would have played against the likes of Malahide and those, and because of the access to the train. The photograph here of Malahide won't mean much to you, but the boy on the left and back row is the patriot Tom Kettle, who died in the First World War. On the other side there is one of the Adams. He was Norman Adams' father. He was a rugby international, played with Wesley, and there's a brother of his in the front. Captain there with the pads on him is one of the champion of the pub in Balgriffin. You know where I am now? Okay. So and Malahide then went, because they were on the train, they went and played cricket in town from 1903. So Malahide played little or no Fingal cricket because it didn't suit to go out the other way. Now, the MHCC were the other end of the town. Now, they were Catholics. Now, they had no field. Not easy. Permanent residents of the town. And they played the odd game in the Phoenix Park, but most of their games were played against country clubs. And for the Fingal cricketer, life was simple. You met at the monument, that was described a little minute while back, up on your bike, cycled to the game, you borrowed the gear, you had a drink then at half time, you finished your match, and then you drained a half keg of beer and you cycled back home. Now, ideally, there were about half a dozen pioneers on the team, so you got most of the keg of beer for yourself. So that was the Fingal cricketer. They were all cycling to the games, okay? They had no ground. Lord Fitzpatrick wouldn't give them anything. The landlord was seen as the chief obstacle. Land was still, at that stage, even 1900s, valuable in Skerries. Photograph there that's the Skerries team. Now, you'll see there that the Fingal cricketer, the only concession they had to dress was the white shirt. Collar and tie, the whole bit. So that was the Emmett's team. And they promoted the games as big, not sporting occasions, but as social occasions. The brass band in Skerries always turned up. But don't think, because there were sporting occasions, that they weren't competitive. And the good old Fingal one, you never let anything go. Now here's the first thing. Because they had used the name Emmet, it has recently been reported that the honoured name is appended to a club organised for the express purpose of fostering Shawneeism in Ireland. The writer refers to a cricket club named after Robert Emmet. Cricket is a foreign game, and the men who play have no right to use the name of dead patriots as titles for their clubs. I might hazard the opinion that the name of the club be changed to a more appropriate one, or better, why not change the name of the game? We're long enough under the laws of the foreigner, must we be under their intellectual genius as well? Now that's a fair old go to have at cricketers. Now, then on we go to the next one, and I mentioned the fact that there were social occasions. But the good old Fingal one, never, ever, ever let an insult go. Report of a game between Knockbrack and Emmet mentioned that Knockbrack would have had an easy win but for an excited element. There was a pitch invasion that prevailed among the spectators when the home team had but one wicket to fall by overruling the umpire's decision, and they refused to let the last man bat. Score, Knockbrack 35, Skerries 21 and 1 wicket to fall. Now the boy in Skerries didn't reply to the Shawneen, but there was no way he was letting that one go. So the following week, the secretary challenged it. He had his own little... I wish to remind the honorary secretary that he's absolutely wrong in his report. The match was broken off through a wrong decision of the umpire. The score stands. Knockbrack 35 all out, Skerries 2 wickets to fall, not 1 but 2. I fail to see where an easy win could be judged on either side. As I say, never let anything go. Here's another example, more of the same. Now, Carduff and Lusk, possibly the most competitive team of all in the area. And that would be for, we'll say, the influence of the likes of Thomas Ashe, where they then went to hurling. But these lads loved cricket, and when they went to town, the train interrupted all the dancing that they were so well looked after because the games in town weren't as competitive. They were probably making people a bit more civilised. Now, here's the next one. Never let a slight go unanswered. Knockbrack in trouble again. The team had won 8 games and they lost only 4. The record wasn't as good as Carduff, but unlike Carduff, they never refused a challenge from clubs that were likely to beat them. Don't let that one go either. You don't? Not a chance. Secretary, Carduff has played and defeated better teams than ever they were, and would not have refused to play and refused to beat them, only on the grounds we are certain they were inclined to pick a local team whom we have defeated. But they're very much inclined for rise and rouse. So now that you can see, you never, ever, ever let anything go. You respond. Now that's the events then that caused the demise of cricket really as a general sport. Farm labourers strike when a lot of the people involved in cricket were also on the platforms. There were rent increases in Skerries and lands as well on the estate, and some of the people who had been on the estate where their lands were sold. There were evictions. A tomb belonging to Wood's family was desecrated. Cattle released on the road. There was a row over seaweed. Lord Patrick wanted to charge for seaweed. They felt there should be no charge for it. World War I, 1916 Rising, the War of Independence, and the Civil War. Now you can see a whole range of events that were going to prevent cricket being played. And cricket was the sport that got caught in the crossfire because it was the one most associated with the English. The rugby was played in the middle class schools. Soccer was played in the inner city and in the garrison towns. So how did cricket come back in Fingal? Well, the first thing, and I was principal of a school in my day job, and you don't tell Fingalians what they can or can't do. They decide themselves. And that's a quote from Patrick Archer. Fingalians are sturdy and possessed of an independent spirit. Nobody is going to tell them what sport they can or can't play. And the regard for cricket ran very, very deep. The ban wasn't implemented at all in Fingal. Now, it wasn't implemented not because they weren't patriotic, but because it didn't suit. Because you had football teams and you had cricket teams in small areas of population. And if you implemented the ban, you'd have no football team or you'd have no cricket teams. You didn't bother implementing. So a lot of the lads played, and oftentimes played, and I'll be coming to one in a minute, they played Gaelic under their mother's maiden name. It kept life much simpler. So the ban just wasn't implemented. Now, they all started back in 1925. The three teams, Skerries, Knockbrack, Malahide. Now Malahide moved to their present ground across the Dublin Road, and they played little or no Fingal cricket. It was much easier to go to town on the train. There was a court case in 1926 to show there was cricket being played. There was a man picked up 6 fellas somewhere up around Navan and brought them to a cricket match, and he was arrested and summoned for using his car as a taxi. And he said no, the boys just got into the car. He was going to watch cricket, and the judge said, and how did that game finish? It didn't. There was a row. So the judge said, well, I hope they won't be appearing in front of me next week. So there was, and then this poor man, John Gilson, in Knightstown, suffered a broken leg playing cricket, hit with a cricket ball. So they were back. Now, they think the Fingal League was started in 1926 in some form. There were only 2 teams in it. There were Knockbrack and Skerries. But there was definitely a final played in 1927. Allegedly, there was 1,000 there. Now, I'm not going to get involved in that discussion. It was played between Knockbrack and Mockra. Mockra were the young men. Knockbrack seconds, who were after getting in, this one was that later, I beg your pardon. Skerries and Knockbrack. And the fellow who played best for Knockbrack was the Squire Ennis. He managed to get some runs, but Skerries won very well. They got a cricket set as a prize for winning a cheque, but you never win. Secretary in his report, you can see what happened. Skerries got first prize, Knockbrack second, Ballymacdone third. Knockbrack and Ballymacdone are to be congratulated as they played in a clean and sportsmanlike manner and had no one on their team for Fingalians. The lads from Skerries were bringing people into play, and that wasn't appreciated. There also was, your man Ennis got 33 runs, and there were 14 boundaries in it. Somebody said, sure, boundaries count as 4. In Fingal, there was a very interesting way of counting, and there was scope for a great row in it. 2 into the long grass, 4 into the longer grass, and 6 if it went over a ditch without hitting a briar. Now you can imagine, how do you differentiate between long grass and longer grass? There's scope in that for months. And the other thing that they had was, when the ball was hit, the club would have one of the fielders standing and counting, and he'd count as the lads ran up and down. And when they had run 6, he'd shout, lost ball, because they could be running and keep running. So you declared the ball lost. A friend of mine, Martin Russell, told me he ran 7 one day, where the boys were out looking for the ball in the ditch. So there you have first final, one of the great finals. Now, the people who wrote the reports were actually poets. This is a report on the game in Knockbrack. Now, the result of the game was Ballybriggan 52, Knockbrack 29. Now, that's all he said about cricket. This is the rest of it. The playing pitch is most picturesquely situated on a level plain near the summit of the famous hill. From the eminence, a panoramic view of great beauty may be obtained. At the foot of the hill is a lovely valley, while in the distance the Dublin mountains, Howth, Ireland's Isle, Lambay and the sea, glimmering beneath, oh that's beautiful, a cloudless summer sky being prominent features in a delightful picture which was never seen to better advantage than on Sunday last. People who rave about Warrenpine, Killarney and other beauty points further afield should visit Knockbrack and see for themselves the delightful scenery that we have out our doors. 1 line on a cricket match, 15 lines of description of scenery, but it's beautiful, definitely a poet. That's absolutely beautiful. And if you played in Knockbrack, an exciting place to play. There's a photograph of Knockbrack with the field gone. Now, I'm not going to go through all the matches. I'll just take this one, because this is when Skerries' great win. They won 3 finals in a row, and then they met Knockbrack. And again, the boy writing this is a poet. He said it was the finest example of cricket ever seen in Fingal. It was up to test standard. Now, these lads are junior cricketers, but it was up to test standard, with the fielders and bowlers winning the day. Now, you're going to reckon on great things. Now, after all that, Knockbrack got 14 runs, and the Squire Ennis got 6 of them. Now, you say that's them well beaten. Not at all. Skerries were bowled out for 13. So there's your test match, 14 to 13. Some game. Right. Knockbrack went on to beat Baldwinstown in the final. But you can see yourself. Now, part of that was there was no time to prepare wickets. You just got a square. You rolled it a little bit. So that's why there were bowlers. The fields were lethal, were dangerous. So the bowlers were always going to be on top. So that's 1929. Now, there's some of the teams that played. I'll just give you a sense of them. I'm not going to do them all. But you had Knockbrack, Skerries, Ballymacdone, Barnageera, which is one side of the hills, Knightstown, Balrotherry and Ring Commons. And then in the other group, Baldwinstown, Knockbrack, Seconds, Balbriggan, Skerrisby, Knowlhill, Balcunnin, Kirkeen and the Black Hills. So there you have a fair spread of teams. Now, the mathematically inclined can do the sum if they want to. Knockbrack played 12 matches and scored 554 runs. Anybody want to do that sum? How many runs did they score in a match, roughly? 12 into 55 goes. There you are. Okay, so you can see, and they won the league. Now, obviously, the pitch in Skerries was a bit better because they got nearly 200 runs more than them. So the scores were low, pitches were terrible, the long grass, and always the bowlers were better than the batters. So that's just to give you a sense of the teams that were playing cricket. Okay. Now, at the end of the season, Baldwinstown and Ballymedunna, that's a local derby. They decided to play one another for a fiver aside. Interesting. And so that there wouldn't be ads because you brought your own umpire with you in Fingal, which was great. Because, it'll have the cheating. But in this case, they had a neutral umpires because they wanted to make sure if you lost a fiver, that was going to be honest anyway. Okay. Cricket in Fingal in the 30s. That's the highest number of teams that there ever were in the Fingal League. Portrane came into it in 1930 from the psychiatric hospital. And they asked could they play their games on a Sunday because they were 7-day rosters. And they wanted something for the staff and the patients, some way of diverting staff and pay, which is a lovely idea. Now, the other thing about it is it was allowed as your work if you were supervising some of the patients. So they wanted to play as many matches as possible in Portrane. And they presented all the beauties of Portrane. It's beside the sea, you can get the train, then you get the bus, and then you can have a swim, and so on. So Portrane came in. And the other team was going to be very important, Man of War, just joined it at that stage, one of the great teams. This was the final. They bought a cup for that. That was on Mockra, second. Mockra got 23 runs. Balcunnin were 22 when the last wicket fell. And a fella caught a catch, or Murphy caught a catch. They're still talking about it. I don't know, like Finn McCool. I don't know how far he ran to catch the ball, but he caught it anyway. There's lads still talking about it. So it was seemingly one of the great catches of our time. And the more you hear about it, the better the catch was. But Mockra won it, and they got the cup for the first time. This cup was valued in 1988 at about 2,500. Rush joined the Fingal League. And a very successful period for Rush. They won a lot of games. Because they were on the railway line, they played Fingal League, but they played in Dublin. And because they were the only ones playing in Dublin, a lot of people gravitated to Rush. So the team that played in Dublin was a way stronger team than their Fingal League team. Because a lot of the greats wanted to play on better wickets and so on. So they went out to Rush to play. So I see some fantastic Rush teams in that era. Noel won the championship 35. Now, there was a fundraiser for the new church in Skerries. And a Fingal side, a selected side, played against Pembroke. And the Fingal Independent says, Pembroke were outclassed. Naturally enough. And some of and remember, the Fingal cricketers were junior cricketers for a long time. Now there's Knockbrack seconds. There's a man in the back row, Tom Moore, who's going to appear again, founder member of the Garristown Historical Society. And he played cricket for years. Tom McGrain, who was the main man. There's the Skerries team. Left in the back is Frank Glennon, father of Jim Glennon, the rugby international and the former TD. 3 in from the back is Bobby Beggs. He's one of the fellas who ignored the ban. Won All-Ireland medal with Galway, won All-Ireland medal with Dublin, but ignored the ban. This ban was for others. So there's the lovely medals. Jim Glennon sent me photographs of the two of them. Then in September, when the league was over, they decided to have a knockout competition, and that was played with Baldwinstown. Baldwinstown won it. And I just want to talk about the cricket clubs. They were never on the periphery of their society. They were always very, very important members. So here we get Balrother. You see what they're doing. Patrons' Day, they had a match between the married men and the single men. Then they had athletic events. Then the PP threw in the football. And then Mrs. Pym, who lent the field, she was going to supervise the dance. So I said, that was good crack. So that's Mrs. Pym. Now we move on to the next dance in Garrison. Now that went great, except somebody took home Miss Crosby's coat. So there was a query come in next week. If they could have done it all, drop back the old coat, please. Right, so now we get the next one. And I actually found this sad. The importance of clubs in an area. Now that the visitors have taken their departure and gone back to their various occupations. The atmosphere of the town has returned to normal, and the people have gone back to the usual routine of hard work and little pleasure for another 9 months. The natives seem to enter into the holiday spirit too, and it's not unusual to see the young people knocking off work as early as 9 o'clock in the summer evenings, and parading the strands and the roads, taking part in the pastimes that attract them most, and evidently enjoying to the fullest extent the only few hours of leisure that they get in the year. For well they know that in the coming of winter, there's no more play for them. Isn't that some comment on the importance of clubs? I don't care what they are, football, hurling, anything. The part that they play, not just as sport. And I found that sort of during COVID, when we weren't allowed to go to the matches. It wasn't the cricket I missed. It was the opportunity to talk to people. How are we getting on? Are we all right? Yeah, okay, we're drive on. I don't know where we are. Right, now you can see there Rush. Now there's a team playing in Dublin. You see the difference? All in whites. Man on the back row on the right is John Mooney, grandfather of the great John Mooney, who's an Irish international. The man on the front row left is Simon Hoare, who played cricket for about 60 years, and magnificent cricketer. He's going to appear a few times in this. So they rushed very, very successful in the 1930s. Now, this is the one where I'm afraid of that I was going to be assaulted. So I said, the Fingal League never, ever, ever ran women's competitions. But Rush were way, way, way ahead of the posse. The Leinster Women's Cricket Union was formed and Rush joined it. There were founder members, did very well. They only played 2 seasons because of the emergency. But here's the bit of the personal insight. Mary Keane was a member. Do you know who Mary Keane was? She was Mrs Kennedy at Castleross. When I used to come in from school for lunch, I wasn't allowed to speak until 1:15. My mother had to hear the Kennedys of Castleross. And one of the main people in it was Birdie O'Hanlon. And when Birdie was leaving, she'd say, Birdie must fly. And when my dad, Lord of Mercy, was going back to the shop, he would then adapt that and say, Paddy must fly. So now there you have insights into the personal life. Okay, drive on, will you, and don't be annoying the people. Okay, right, women's cricket. We're into the 1940s, going rapidly. Nothing much there. Man of War is in it. That was the last game they played. And the last game they played, a man appeared in that who took runs and wickets, Thomas Morgan. Another very important name. Thomas Morgan is grandfather of Owen Morgan, captain, World Cup winning captain. And that's what you're going to see, a pattern. You're going to see a pattern of families appearing all over the place. Walshestown, that was followed on from the Man of War. Tom Murphy played with that team. Tubbergregan, and there's a man called Peter O'Brien I'm going to mention there. And that. So there you have the teams in the 40s, nothing else. There's the final, Tubbergregan and Walshestown. And you're going to see 2 men, Peter O'Brien, P.P. O'Brien, and got 53. Magnificent cricketer. Played cricket with Rush, played cricket with Tubbergregan, as I said, in Fingal League, and played in Meath as well. And used to go to Australia then during our winter to work. And we'll hear a bit more about Peter O'Brien. There's the 2 lads, Peter O'Brien and Tom Murphy. Tom Murphy's first anniversary is coming up in November. Tom would have been 98, I think, or 99, I think, in August of this year, had he lived. He only died his first anniversary. There's the Walshestown team, Tom Murphy, that I've just saw there, second from the right, in the back row. Drogheda Independent, again, they ran these big matches, and this was one where Fingal played a Phoenix selection. Now, Phoenix had 5 internationals on it. All the Quins were internationals. Don't ask me which one of them wasn't, the rest of them were, and Jimmy Boucher. And naturally enough, Fingal won again. And Simon Hoare, anyone know anything about cricket will know, Simon Hoare took 5 wickets for no runs at all. And Simon was magnificent. And there he is. There's Simon Hoare on the left and the great Kit Mooney on the right. Simon Hoare played cricket from 1929 to 1976, and Kit lasted from 1930 to 1979. And the other great, the third great I mentioned, is Christy Russell. Now, look at that team, and there's one name in that. They were going to play in Rathmines, but there's a name halfway down there, P-U-R-L. Now, P-U-R-L is an assumed name. That is not his name. The great Paddy Neville, his mother's maiden name was Urell. And Paddy Neville, you can make a very, very strong case that Paddy Neville was the finest ever Irish sportsman. Played hockey with Ireland, was on a Triple Crown winning team. Played cricket with Malahide and won the best batsman 3 times. Played with the Irish cricket team when he replaced Noel Cantwell. Noel Cantwell was needed by West Ham. played middle of the field with Parnells and played with the Dubs, and then signed forms with Drumcondra, played in goal with Drumcondra when the league teams, the Irish League, the League of Ireland, played all against one another, and was 4 times on the full team. The great Paddy Neville. And when his brother was asked what his finest achievement was, he said in a final against Trinity in the hockey, he was credited with a goal, and he said to the ref, that wasn't a goal, it went in through the side of the net. And the ref said, no, it didn't, it went in. And it went down and he found a hole in the net. That was the way Paddy Neville played. Gentleman, magnificent sportsman, and I don't think anyone that I can think of played as many sports to that level. And when the lads played in Rathmines, all the reports said when they came back, they won naturally enough. But you see, in fairness, they were playing Leinster's thirds. It wasn't if they were playing internationals, but that they looked very well in their whites, because it was important to look well. Whatever about you, don't let the side down when you go off. Now, 52 slides done. I'm watching the bouncers at the back getting ready to throw me out. And there we have Paddy Neville running out on the field in the Phoenix Park, and there he is in goal for Drumcondra. Magnificent sportsman. Right, I'm into the 1950s. Rush won the Intermediate League 1950. I have another big sportsman coming there. And Balrotherry won the Intermediate Cup. And in winning the Intermediate Cup, they were qualified to play in a national cup, an Irish national cup. They won it. And their proudest boast was, you see, a lot of the clubs were descended from gentry, but Balrotherry were very proud that all of their players were farmers, farm workers, and one schoolboy who learned their cricket on the village green. They were not associated with gentry. So they won the Irish Junior Cup. This was a great era. Now, because they did so well, Malahide played Fingal cricket that year. It was the only year they played it. Malahide then got into senior cricket in 53, so that was really the end of any commitment to it. Now, in the 50s, and for anyone who grew up in the 50s, it's an awful time in Ireland. Unemployment rampant, emigration rampant, as all my own dad, Lord of Mercy, went to England in the late 50s. So, they actually were going to scrap the Fingal League altogether. Forget it, give it up. But they decided, no, we won't. We'll stick with it. And Thomas McGrain took over as secretary, treasurer, and he kept cricket going in Fingal, in the Fingal League, until he got ill in 2012. And when anyone asks how cricket lasted in Fingal, it lasted because of the Fingal League, because it gave cricket to be played. Now you see, Balrotherry team, again, you can see the difference. Once you're playing in town, you're nicely turned out. John Mooney, grandfather John, is at the back row there on the right. Middle is, of the front row is Christy Russell, or Kit Mooney, that I showed you, and the back in the cap there is Simon Hoare. There's Rush, another one of the greats, tall man in the middle, Con Martin, played in goal with Aston Villa, played Gaelic football, beautiful cricketer. There's a few interesting lads in that. David O'Connor, the county councillor, his dad is in that. Right, Cottrellstown won the cup in 54, and who was the captain? Tom Moore, who we saw 20 years previously playing with Knockbrack. There's Tom, who founded a member of the local historical society in Garrettstown. Now there's one of the legendary Fingal men, Billy Tolan. Billy Tolan used to collect the gate and used to mind the plaques. There are the plaques beside him in case anyone robbed them. And Billy played cricket. He first played in 1936 and he played his last game in 2000. Now I know my young lads played along with him, and Billy had 2 bats. One of them he referred to as the hitting bat, and the other bat was the blocking bat. So it depended on circumstances, did he need to use the blocking bat or the hitting bat. Absolutely lovely man. Loved cricket, cycled to all the games. When he went into town, he wore his cricket jumper, and he'd have the medals in the pocket to show the Fingal medals that he won. Lovely, lovely man. And that was his job, because you were charged into the Fingal match, and it was a shilling to get in. Now, we're seeing the end of cricket in Dublin in the West. Cottrellstown, having won the league 2-3 years, gone, finished. And that was the end of cricket in the West for a long time. Now, P.P. O'Brien, I mentioned, great sportsman, handballer and everything, was go to Australia, was killed off a building in 1959. 1960, Ring Commons reformed, practiced everything on his last knees. Balbriggan reformed, Manawar went into Leinster, Knockbrack went into Leinster. Rush lost a lovely ground. The Kenure estate was sold. Lost the ground, they couldn't buy the field, and they had to play all their games away one year, and the next year they played them all in Balrotherry. They got a new ground then in 1966, full of trees, no grass on it, spent ages. So there's a pile of fundraising. So the big fundraiser was, and I mentioned that in passing, was the dance. They got a dance in the Saturday before Ash Wednesday. Now, those of you who grew up in that era will know the Catholic Church didn't allow dances during Lent. So this was a prime night. But because it was a prime night, there was a clash of fixtures. Dickie Rock was in Portmarnock in the Palm Beach. But the one in Portmarnock sold out. So they got the overshoot, all came out to Rush. The biggest fundraiser they ever had. And the other postscript to that story is Dickie collapsed on the stage in Portmarnock and they didn't think he'd be able to sing in the Eurovision. Can you remember the song? Come Back to Stay, wasn't it? Oh, good night. Right, okay. So that's more useless information. How am I doing to the back? 15? Oh, okay. I'm conscious. I'm only 60 years to go. Right, trophy winners. I'll skip all that. Right, Knockbrack did great in the 60s, and the man 2 down from the right, one of the greats, Sean Moore, one of the great cricketers. Man of War, there you have Tom Murphy is there, Simon Hoare is there, Joey Archer's there. Balbriggan, man with the cup is Jack Harper, after whom the field in Balbriggan is called and who did so much for cricket in Balbriggan, the Harper family. That was the Man of War's ground, the Nevitt, not used anymore. There's Balrothery's old ground, the Mat. Fingal cricket in the 70s, have you anything to say there? Not much, no. Except the Hill started to play in Fingal in 1970. 1971, 1971, the Balrothery won the thing, and that game that beat the Hills, and the youngsters marched around the ground saying, 2, 4, 6, 8, we're going to bait you out the gate. So you can kind of show the level of competition that there was. Rush, new clubhouses and so on. Women's cricket again, because I'm definitely minding me back. Rush played only in Dublin, Women's League for 77, and that was a prelude to Rush players getting international recognition. This was a constant whinge that the Fingal people had, that our best cricketers didn't get picked. And I've come to a friend of mine who didn't get picked until he was 39 years of age for Ireland. So there, Angela Murphy won Division 2, Anne Murphy, see I'm mentioning all these, and there's the Rush ladies who were all first cap for Ireland, all magnificent cricketers. See, that's I'm safe now again. Right, so in 1980, the Hills, after years and years and years of trying to get into senior cricket, eventually got in 1983. Having been told that everything was wrong with the ground, the field wasn't big enough, the ancillary weren't big enough, and so on. So 1983 got into, and that caused a problem for the other clubs, because now the more ambitious players were gravitating to the Hills, which meant they had to do something. So Balrothery and Man of War combined to form North County in 1985. 1988, see I'm on a roll again, the Hills formed a women's team. And did very, very well. North County now had enough players to have a women's team and were very, very good. You're talking serious cricketers. North County won the Division 2 of the women. 1989, the Hills won the Senior Cup and the double. And they only got 138 runs out in Carlisle grounds. Pat Hines was at the game and the Hills batted so badly he drove home. He was under the railway bridge in Skerries when Philip Green announced that the Hills were after winning. So he turned the car around and went back to join the lads in the pitch invasion. Fingal 1990, North County are now senior. Rush, great success. They got senior in 1995. New pavilion in the Hills. And the Hills hosted a final in 96, which was a great compliment because 20 years previously they'd been told that everything was wrong. Now they're the first Fingal club to be allowed to host the Leinster senior final. This is the father of John Mooney, Lord have mercy on him. The Ranger died on the 5th of August 1993. He was only 46 years of age. That's John Mooney's dad. That's the Hills ground, the Vineyard. Big long story, we won't tell you how it was called the Vineyard because life's too short. Now we're going to get the next part of it. International recognition for the men. First one to be picked from the Hills, Declan Moore, 1996. And then my great friend Matt Dwyer. He won the Leinster best bowler in Leinster 5 times and couldn't get on the team. He didn't get on it till he was 39 years of age and went on to get 50 caps for Ireland. You can imagine how many he would have got had he been picked when he should have been picked. And these are the other, Barry Archer and Paul Mooney, Conor Armstrong and his dad. These are all internationals, the great John Mooney, Eddie Richardson, Fintan McAllister. There's all and that's only some of the internationals. At last now they're being picked. I'm nearly there now. I'm watching the man down the back. Jeez, I could get thrown out of here. Right. And Mrs. Byrne, whose husband Jerry was a main man in Fingal. When Jerry died, his wife wrote into the Fingal League thanking them for their condolences and saying, I hope Fingal cricket will always last. Fingal League cricket will always last. Joe Clinton did a paper on a talk, and Joe's the inspiration and the impetus for the stuff that I'm doing at the minute. And he saw the beginning and the end because the games in town were more important. Because basically, the clubs were filling men's team, women's team, youth's team. There just wasn't room on the grounds. So, and work patterns had changed. With the Celtic Tiger, the people coming in, while they were committed to the club, weren't committed to the concept of Fingal. So it was much harder. So it was the beginning and the end. 2001, they decided to play 20 overs. 2012, the fixtures were made. Thomas McGrain became ill. They weren't played, and that really was the end of it. There's Mrs. Byrne, who celebrated her 100th birthday in May. We had a fantastic day in the Vineyard. God bless her. Great woman. There's Joe Clinton that I mentioned there, who local historian who did so much. Now, 2000s, North County moved to their new ground. Malahide won the Senior Cup on a great Fingal occasion. There were two Morgans playing. Owen Morgan was playing with one team and his brother was playing with the others. North County, their centre of excellence. I'll show you a photograph of that in a minute. And North County, during that period, best club in Ireland for 10 years. No doubt in my mind. I won't go through all the things they won. Fingal was at the centre of Irish cricket in 2007. North County had 3 players on the team that did so well in the West Indies. Paul Mooney, John Mooney, Andre both were on the team who did so well. Matt Dwyer, my friend, was the assistant coach. And the Fingal County Councillor was there dressed as St. Patrick. I won't mention his name. There's the North County team 2001. Great team. 3 or 4 internationals and an overseas player. And here's my favourite cricket photograph. North County in twilight. The centre of excellence. Absolutely beautiful photograph. I've only 5 to go. I'm nearly there. Right. 2010. Great day in Bangalore. Ireland beat England. John Mooney got the winning runs. Hills won the Senior Cup, and must mention that. Ireland played England. And I'd have to mention Fingal County Council there, because it's thanks to Fingal County Council that the ground in Malahide was developed to the extent that was developed. Ireland played England, and both captains had played with Rush, Owen Morgan and William Porterfield. Great, great day, 10,000 at the game. Malahide won the National Cup, which is the second cup. The Hills won the Senior Cup again, and then Rush. Owen Morgan, you can see that, captain of an England World Cup winning team, and David O'Connor was president of Cricket Ireland. So you're seeing more and more recognition for Fingal. That's the great John Wright, who did so much for cricket and did so much to ensure that the cricket ground in Malahide was developed in consultation with Fingal County Council, Cricket Ireland and so on. Owen Morgan, World Cup winning captain. William Porterfield, who was captain of the Irish team at the time, getting his first cap. And where are we today? Balbriggan won the championship, which is the second division, in 2021. And today, Balbriggan are top of the heap. They won the Premier League, a magnificent achievement, in 2022. Cricket is back now in the West. This again is an initiative with Fingal County Council and Cricket Leinster. So there's now cricket teams in Tyrrellstown, Castleknock, Lucan and Swords. And that's the future. That's the future for Fingal cricket. So just to mention, the Fingal League was of its time. It preserved a much-loved game. It nurtured and developed it. And all who were involved for practically 90 years, we owe them a debt of gratitude. As we finish this afternoon, I think the time is opportune to organise some kind of a commemorative event as a fitting tribute to the officers and players of the Fingal League who've contributed so much to the sporting, social and cultural history of Fingal, Leinster and Ireland. Thanks very much for your attention.